So glad to see everybody. Lots of smiling faces I see. What a great thing. um, this would be my third trip to Eastern Europe. Paul Shapiro, probably his 100th trip to Eastern Europe. And Amy's first trip to Eastern Europe. Second trip, right? First trip?
First trip with the temple.
With the
I
temple.
have done some travel alone, but with my family. But thank you, Mike.
Yeah. And so, you know, a number of years ago, I think it was 2014, Ayelet Tours, who does our some of our Israel trips, had contacted, kind of put out a note out there that they were looking for rabbis and cantors to learn about doing trips to Eastern Europe. And so I went on that trip with about 15 rabbis and cantors and was just blown away by what I discovered, learning about what, you know, the Ashkenazi Jewish past for most of us. You know, our ancestors came from that area of where we're going to go. And after being there, after stepping foot in Auschwitz, and also seeing what life was like before the Holocaust, I felt that every Ashkenazi Jew needs to go to both Eastern Europe and Israel, just to really understand, you know, our past and the potential for, well, Israel is a whole nother story. So I'm glad some of you are doing both, or maybe doing both, which is great. So the second trip was, I think it was 2017, 16, 17, what I can't remember. And I invited Paul to come along. Beth Silver and I and Paul and Nancy led that trip with 2 buses. We were about, I don't know, 60, 70 people, something like that. And again, it was an amazing trip. And for me, the second time being there, what was so amazing for me was seeing these things again, but hearing Paul talk about them and having Paul bring context from our understanding of kind of American Judaism, from understanding of our maybe our limited understanding of Ashkenazi history, what we were seeing. And that was an amazing experience. And so then we had COVID and everything got delayed and delayed and delayed. And now we're ready to do another trip to Eastern Europe. And I asked Amy if she would join me on this trip. And Paul again as well. So we are your 3 leaders of this trip. My original hope was that we would keep it to a smaller trip to 1 bus. I don't know if that's going to happen, and because of so many of you interested. So that's still kind of in play at the moment. We'll have to see. If we end up with 2 buses, we will look for also adding another scholar/lecturer person too, so that each bus has someone that they can ask those questions of and put things in context. But that's down the road a little bit. So what we're going to do today is really go through the itinerary, understanding where it is. It's still in flux a little bit. Ayelet Tours is our tour company, and the person who's managing this for us is actually I think he lives in Prague, and he does all of the Eastern European tours for Ayelet. NVHC just did one this past summer that they did, and they did our last one. I'm really pleased that they're available to do this again. So, and then if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, or and maybe Amy and Paul, if you see, feel free to jump in or see people's questions if my screen is blocked for some reason. So I'm going to share this. Okay. I'm assuming everyone can see my screen, and we're going to get started. So because I have 1 monitor, Amy, I don't see a lot of what's going on what people are seeing. So just interrupt me if someone is trying to ask a question.
I will interrupt you. I've never done that before, but I'll do it today.
Okay. All right, so here we go. All right, so first of all, objectives of this trip. You know, Ayelet wrote that Jewish history in Europe neither begins nor ends with the Holocaust. So together we will explore 1,000 years of Jewish history. We'll learn about Jewish Europe before World War II, what it was like to live in a shtetl, for example, what it was like for our people who live both in the cities and in the suburbs there, or in the rural communities there. We're going to confront the horrors of the Holocaust. We're going to step into two death camps, basically. One that is mostly a monument I haven't been to yet, and one, Auschwitz-Birkenau that is just overwhelming to see. And we're going to experience the nascent Jewish renewal of the present, to hear, to see the synagogues that are standing, to meet with the Jewish community members there and what they're doing, and discuss the challenges that face a Jewish future in Europe. The cities that we are going to focus on are Warsaw, Krakow, Vienna, which I've never been to, that's new for this trip, and Budapest. The dates of the trip are, we're talking about, I really wanted to add Berlin on this trip because on our last trip, Berlin was part of it. We decided that we couldn't do the other cities justice if we cut things back by a few days. So we're making Berlin an optional pre-tour. And I'll talk about that at the end. But if you want to go to Berlin, which I highly recommend, and I'm planning on leading that pre-tour, we will leave here on the 24th of October, arrive in Berlin on the 25th, and then we will stay there till the 28th, when we then go to Warsaw and we'll meet the main trip there. So 24th to 28th, Tuesday 24th to Saturday the 28th, we'll be in Berlin. Then the main tour starts on the 29th of October, and that's where we'll start in Warsaw. So if you're not going to Berlin, you'll leave on the 28th or whenever you want, but we'll start the tour in Warsaw on October 29th. We'll go from Warsaw to Krakow, to Vienna, to Budapest, and we'll leave Budapest on November 10th, early in the morning. Just a sense of where we're going here. The pre-tour here in Berlin, we will then fly, for those of us on the pre-tour, fly to Warsaw. Everyone else will fly to Warsaw, will meet us in Warsaw. We're in Warsaw for a couple of days, where we'll go up to see the concentration camp Treblinka, and to this area, Tykocin. And Paul, please correct any of my mispronunciations. My Polish is not very good these days. And that's the remains of a shtetl that we'll see that I've never been to, and looking forward to seeing what that would be like. From Warsaw, we drive on a bus to Krakow, and in Krakow we're going to then go off to this area here to the east, and we're going to
Rzeszów.
Thank you, because I was not going to try that. Rzeszów. I was going to say something like Rzeszów. So Rzeszów, and we're going to be near actually the Ukraine, right? We're going to be near Ukraine, which is kind of, I think it's this area here. Is that right, Paul?
That's right. That's
Yep.
the border.
So if it's possible, we're saying if, then we'll be able to possibly make it to the border there. And then we're going to, I believe, fly to Vienna from Krakow. And we'll be in Vienna for a couple days, and then we take a bus to Budapest. And from Budapest, we'll go back to home. So let's go through the itinerary. We're going to start, I'm going to forget the pre-trip right now. We'll come back to that at the end. So Warsaw, we arrive in Warsaw on Sunday, October 29th. It's the Polish capital and the focus of much of Nazi destruction. It was rebuilt during Soviet rule and now has become a modern capital of Europe. We begin with kind of an overall tour of the city. We'll stop at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, a monument to Chopin. No, that's not correct. I'm reading that wrong. Right, Paul? That's that monument. Do you know that monument?
It's there,
It is there. It is correct. I'm saying
it's
right.
there.
Okay.
but I
And-
would say the most central part of that day is the visit to the Museum of the History of Polish Jews.
Exactly, which is what you're seeing the picture on the screen. It's an incredible museum that really takes all day to see. And so we want to have time there. So we will spend time in that. It's a relatively new museum. I think it was new when we got there in 2016 or 17, Paul, is that right?
That's right. And it's at the monument to the Warsaw Ghetto, so you're
Which
right
is
in
what
the middle of the ghetto there.
this is, the monument to the Warsaw Ghetto, and here's the museum in the background. The end of that day, we'll have a welcome dinner, and we're staying, by the way, in the Intercontinental Hotel. On the next day, October 30th, this is where we'll drive on our way to Tkosin. We're going to stop at Treblinka Extermination Camp. Paul, do you want to say anything about that? Because I've never been there.
Well, it's a very powerful monument. The Nazis, as they withdrew from the area, totally destroyed any sign or remnant of the camp that had been there. This was a camp where to which Jews from the Warsaw Ghetto were sent and were murdered on arrival. So there's no camp left. On the other hand, the monument itself is a reflection of how many communities in Poland were destroyed. That's the symbolism of these stones. And the stones, according to size and location, are a reflection of the communities of Polish Jews who were killed during the Holocaust. It's quite a different experience from the experience at Auschwitz, where you still have remaining a part of the camp so that you can understand better what happened there.
Beautiful. And then along the way, we stop along the road. There's mass graves in Lipochowo Forest. Is that close?
That's all right. It's we'll train you on the
Thank
Polish
you.
names.
Yes, language is not good.
The key here is that in this part of the world, the further east you go, the more the Holocaust took place in face-to-face killing, not the image that we tend to have in the United States of industrialized camps to which Jews were taken. And in essence, you could stop at any point along almost any road in Poland or Ukraine and be at a mass killing site.
And then we'll head back to Warsaw, dinner with the Jewish community there. And so we'll get a chance to talk to them, what life is like for them there in Warsaw, and another night at the hotel. On the next day, Tuesday, October 31st, we'll begin with a morning discussion with a group called Forum for Dialogue, an organization dedicated to inspiring new connections between non-Jews in contemporary Poland and the Jewish people. We'll then do a walking tour of the Warsaw Ghetto. There's not a lot to see of the actual ghetto wall there. What you're looking at is a picture. There's not a lot of that left, but we'll actually walk through what the ghetto was like. We'll end up going to the huge Jewish cemetery there. And Mila 18, can you explain what that is, Paul?
Mila 18 was a headquarters of the resistance movement in the ghetto. If you haven't read the Leon Uris, I think it was Leon Uris novel, Mila 18, it tells that story in a very dramatic way. And of course, it's the story of Jewish resistance at a time when the Jews were totally isolated. One of the impacts of visiting the site of the ghetto is the realization that this was right in the center of the city. It was unlike the camps that we tend to think about, which were in isolated places where trains took people to locations where they couldn't be seen, where what was being done couldn't be seen. In the Warsaw Ghetto, this is right in the middle of the city. In fact, there's a demarcation of the outline of the ghetto, and each time that you cross it, you realize that you're 20 steps from some major monument or major public building that was on the Aryan side of the ghetto wall.
And then we're also going to go to the site of the deportation of the Warsaw Jewish community to Treblinka, which I'm not going to try and pronounce the name of. So, and then time permitting, we'll stop at the Warsaw Zoo to visit the zookeeper's house, which was owned by the couple that saved many Jews during the Holocaust and memorialized in the movie The Zookeeper's Wife. And then we'll have a chance that night to have dinner on your own. Okay. The next day, we drive on our way to Krakow, and we stop at these two places,
Kielce and
Kielce.
Płotny.
Płotny 17. And the picture you're seeing is the synagogue that's in Kielce, I believe. This is this was a Jewish community that is outside of Krakow. Correct, Paul?
Well, the key to understanding Kielce is that after the war, and there's a whole part of this trip where we'll encounter remnant Jewish communities that are still in these places. But after the war, survivors from concentration camps and from forced labor sites, first thing that they did was go back to their home communities to see if they could find other members of their families. In Kielce, after the war, so it's long after the Germans have been pushed out, withdrawn, in Kielce, Jews who returned were murdered because guess what? They wanted to move back into their homes. They wanted perhaps to retrieve their belongings that had been distributed to locals. So it's just an indicator of the power of anti-Semitism even after the experience of the Holocaust. And there's a whole discussion that one needs to have about for the sites that one is that you're visiting on this trip: Poland, Hungary, Austria, and Germany. What has been the relationship historically between Jews and non-Jews? What was it during the Holocaust, and what is it today? You really have to look at the long span of history to understand even an event like what happened in Kielce.
And one of the people that is involved in that area in combating anti-Semitism and xenophobia is this man, Bogdan Bialik. He was part of the restoration process of restoring the local community. And so we're gonna have a face-to-face meeting with him. And then we'll continue heading towards Krakow. We'll come into Krakow. We'll see some of the ancient landmarks in Krakow, St. Mary's Church, the Renaissance Cloth Hall. We'll go by the Wawel Castle, but I think the next day is when we'll actually tour that. Krakow to me was my favorite city when I went there both times. It was not destroyed in the war, and so it is what you see is what it was, and it's beautiful and it's very meaningful there. We'll check into the hotel, have dinner at the hotel, and hear a lecture by the head of the Jewish Studies program at Krakow University.
I just want to jump in for a second. You passed so quickly over Wawel Castle. Krakow
in the next slide, though, just so you know.
Was the historic capital of Poland. And it's from Wawel Castle that the Polish kings welcomed Jews to Poland as they were being expelled from countries in Western Europe. And there is a reason that there were a lot of Jews in this part of the world that the trip takes us to. One of them is that it was a place that welcomed Jews for various reasons. But Wawel is a representation in concrete terms of that open door for Jews. And you see the result of that open door in Krakow, where there are still today so many Jewish monuments and synagogues that one can still visit, despite the general destruction of such places during the Holocaust.
And we're going to see that's the Wawel Castle there in the picture. We're going to see that, and we're going to tour that on the next day. We're also going to stop at it's really a Jewish heritage tour on that day. So we're going to go first to the Galicia Museum. We'll stop and see a synagogue, go to the ghetto wall that was in Krakow. We'll tour the castle. We'll stop at the Krakow JCC, which is a vibrant place. And I think one of the most important places for Jews and others to get together to help those in Ukraine. They've been, during the Ukraine war, they've been working out of the Krakow JCC to help send supplies and things like that. We'll be meeting with the executive director at that point at the JCC. And then at night, there's a cultural option. And it says, we enjoy a delicious culinary tour of the Kazimierz Jewish Quarter, enjoying local delicacies such as pierogies and other things like that. It's a great place to eat, or you can dine on your own. There's so many beautiful, great restaurants there that you can see. On the next day, we'll drive to Auschwitz, Friday, November 3rd. This will be a very difficult day, and we'll end with a service that Amy and I will do in an amazing synagogue back in Krakow. But we'll go first to Auschwitz and tour that facility. We'll then get back on the bus and go to Birkenau, which is, I can't even, there are no words to describe it. And we'll probably do a little service there in memory of all the people who died at Birkenau. We'll also see the area generally where we think Rabbi Berkowitz, where he was in Birkenau. We then head back. It's not that far away from Krakow, and we're going to go to what's called the Temple Synagogue. It was a Reform synagogue in Krakow that was not destroyed, that's still standing. It's an unbelievable synagogue. I didn't think that there were Reform Jews really in Krakow. I was totally wrong. I always thought it was, Reform Judaism, which was mostly in Germany and Vienna and places like that. But this was a Reform community. There was an organ in that synagogue. It's unbelievable. And we did a service that was very meaningful last trip. So that'll be our Friday night service there, just us. And I've got, I guess, anybody in the community that happens to walk in. It is not a functioning synagogue. It's a museum at this point. Then after that, we'll go to the JCC and have Shabbat dinner with folks in the community. Then on Saturday, we get up and we go to Rzeszów. Did I say it right?
Rzeszów.
Oh, Rzeszów. Got the beginning, not the end. Rzeszów. You want to explain this and the Markova Museum?
So for me, this is an interesting wrinkle in this itinerary. We tend to think that Jews are very urban people, live in big cities, concentrate there. In fact, it's in this little corner of southeastern Poland that you really had a huge concentration of Jews living in rural communities and in small towns. So Rzeszów itself, it was a small town up until very recent years. Markova is a village. Łęczyce is well, it's hard to describe. If you have your imagery of what a royal castle like Versailles looks like. Well, there were hugely wealthy Polish noble families that had homes like that out, we would say, in the middle of nowhere. They needed managers. They had lots of peasants, but they needed people who could read and write. There were very strong ties between Polish nobility in this part of Poland and Jews. So at Łęczyce, you have an enormous, almost as big as a Prussian palace, let's say, where the nobility lived, and right up at the wall of that family estate, there's an amazing Jewish synagogue in a town where even today, I would say the population of the town is probably not more than 5,000, 7,000, 8,000. And there's a whole story about that relationship between leaders of Poland and their Jewish community spread across. So it's an opportunity to see Jewish life, not city by city, but Jewish life as it was for lots of Jews in this part of Europe. And remember, this was the heart of the Jewish world well, up until most recent times, up until the Holocaust. When people say Galician Jews, this is Galicia.
And
So
I see,
the Markovo Museum, there's a whole mythology that various countries, and we will talk about this, have about their role in the Holocaust. And one of the current myths promoted by the Polish government today is that Poles played no part in the Holocaust, that Poles only rescued Jews. They have built in a village, and truly the village is probably less than 1,000 people total, a modern museum, because in that village there was a family that hid a family of Jews and paid the price at the end. But the desire to distort the history is so strong that the government of Poland built a museum, you will see, out in the middle of nowhere to tell the story of that family.
and I see that, Ellie, you wrote that, are you saying that sound of that the town of Łęczyce is 50 miles from your grandfather's village? Is that what you're saying?
That's from Rob's grandfather's village.
We're on my computer, so it comes out.
Okay, got it.
Well,
Yeah.
a huge number of Jews who came to the United States came exactly from this region. If you look in the more modern era, one of the Nazis' first plans for how to drain Jews from all of Europe was to send them all to this region, because there was already such a high concentration of Jews living there. And the Ukraine border has meaning in history as well as today as well.
Thank you, Paul. And so the Ukraine border is pending security approval. Obviously, we're not going to go there if there's any kind of danger, but it will be interesting if we can go there to see that. And also, I neglected to say at the beginning of this call, Paul. Some of you may know Paul. Some of you may not know Paul. So Paul is the director of International Affairs at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. I wrote it incorrectly on the itinerary that I sent you. His current title is Director of International Affairs. He's Director Emeritus of the Center for Advanced Holocaust Studies. Paul travels all over Europe representing the Holocaust Memorial Museum, and is, as you can tell just from the first few minutes of this call, is extremely knowledgeable about all of this. We are so lucky that Paul is a longtime member of the temple.
I have to say, just as a tickler here, Michael, this photo that Ayelet has included, that's the interior of the synagogue in Łęczyce. And when you realize you're in the middle of nowhere, to quote how we would refer to such a place, it's an amazing sight to see, really.
Yeah. I'm excited to see that. That was not on our previous trip. And I know, Andy, you asked about the difference between this trip and the last trip I took. I'll talk about those in a minute once we get through the itinerary. So then we head back to Krakow, dinner on our own. Lots of great places to eat there, as I mentioned. And then the next morning, hang on. Yep, the next morning we fly to Vienna. I've never been to Vienna. I always wanted to go. One of my grandmother's families was from Vienna, and it was important to me to see that. It's also such an important musical place. And the father of the father of the cantorate, the modern cantorate, Solomon Sulzer, was the cantor in Vienna, and we'll see his synagogue in a minute in the picture. He's the one who wrote Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. So he's obviously one of the most important figures of modern Jewish music, both Reform, Conservative, and even Orthodox, but mostly Reform is where he started reforming the service, and that's in Vienna. So we're going to tour Vienna. I don't know much about these things, so Paul, feel free to jump in. The palace that you're seeing, that's the Schönbrunn Palace?
Schönbrunn, that's the Habsburg imperial family's summer home, which is just a couple of miles from the center of the city today. Of course, in older times, it was further out. It's a massive place, gives you some sense of how emperors lived.
And you said this is the
modestly.
This is the Habsburgs?
Yep. So the Habsburg Empire, later called Austria-Hungary, was actually the largest territory, singly run territory in all of Europe for many centuries. It included Austria and what today is Hungary and all of Galicia that we will have visited in Poland. Of course, the family was overthrown at the end of World War I. Independent Austria was created. It was then absorbed into the Third Reich in 1938, reestablished after the war as a neutral country. So this is the residence of a family that ruled from the 1481 was when they first became Holy Roman Emperors, which carried weight in those days, ruled in Europe for 500 years.
So that's going to be important for our understanding of Jewish history in that area.
Yep.
That night, we meet with the Jewish community of Vienna. We have dinner with them, and we stay at the Intercontinental Hotel in Vienna. The next day is the Jewish tour of Vienna. We go to their Holocaust Memorial, their Jewish Community Center, Jewish Museum there. This is the synagogue picture that you see, that Solomon Sulzer was the cantor. We'll go there. And we will stop at the Simon Wiesenthal Center for Holocaust Research. For those of you who want to take on a concert in Vienna, which I feel like that's what you need to do when you're in Vienna, there'll be an optional concert there and dinner on your own. Then we drive to Budapest the next day. First there's some more things that we'll see in Vienna that morning. A walking tour of which we'll be able to see views of the Vienna Opera House and the Alexanderplatz Public Square in Vienna. So it's probably a little bus ride and walking tour in the morning, and then we travel to Budapest. And this is a picture of the Parliament building in Budapest, which is a really beautiful, beautiful place where we'll be able to go in there We will stop at, I see the first thing we'll do really is just, we'll drive around Budapest a little bit and show you some sites. We'll view the Suitcase Memorial in Freedom Square, which is the Jewish community's response to the new and controversial memorial installed by the Hungarian government, which many believe seeks to absolve the state from its involvement in World War II, according to Ayelet's itinerary. We'll see St. Stephen's Basilica, a Roman Catholic basilica named in honor of Stephen, the first king of Hungary. And we'll spend the evening exploring the city and enjoying dinner on our own that night.
Let me just say a word about this
Please.
Parliament building, because again, the history here is so interesting. So there's this enormous Parliament building built in 1897 to mark 1,000 years of Hungarian rule in the Carpathian Basin. It's an enormous building because at the time it was built, Hungary included Croatia. What today is Croatia. It included Slovakia. It included whole chunks of Ukraine, Carpathian Ruthenia. It included Transylvania in Romania. Hungary was a huge state with diverse populations, and they built this Capitol building, Parliament building, basically to reflect governance over a huge area. World War I, Hungary lost 2/3 of its territory, of its historical territory. And ever since, there has been a tension between the aspiration that this building still represents for many nationalist Hungarians and the reality of Hungary today, which is a quite small state in the center of a landlocked state in the center of Europe. That history has enormous implications for the Jews of Hungary, who in that enormously big state were politically significant for the Hungarian dominance of the state. After World War I, Jews were the only non-ethnic Hungarian component of the population of that reduced state. And Jews went from being loved and embraced to being pushed away as a result of those territorial changes. And it's a very powerful story historically that we'll talk more about when we're there, obviously.
Can I just interrupt? I've been, keeping tabs of the questions, but this one is about the slide that's on the,
Yeah, no,
Go ahead, Mike.
I was gonna push the button now. We're, the next day, we're actually gonna go to the Parliament. So when we get there on Tuesday, we're really just driving around to seeing Budapest. I don't know if we're gonna go on the other side of the Danube River. The city is, the former cities were Buda and Pest, and they were on either side of the river. And last time we went over, so you could see that picture of the Parliament. I don't know if that's gonna happen on Tuesday or Wednesday, but the actual tour of Parliament will be Wednesday. The picture that you see is the Shoe Memorial, which is not on the itinerary that Ayelet sent us, but I'm hoping it will be. To me, it was one of the most meaningful things that I remember from Budapest, and I hope that we get to see that. I think one of the problems is it's hard to get to, like it's hard to pull a bus over and see it. So we may just drive by it, but so that all happens on Wednesday. And then we'll have dinner on our own. By the way, the hotel we're staying at, which is where we stayed last time, the Kempinski Hotel, is a great hotel, and it's in walking distance to a lot of good places. I think you can even walk to the Shoe Memorial from there. It's a little far, but I think you can do that. Okay, so that's Wednesday. And then Thursday is basically Jewish Budapest for us. We will go to the Doheny Synagogue, which is the synagogue you see in the picture. It's unbelievable. It is where Rabbi Berkowitz went to when he was in Budapest. The rabbi of the Doheny synagogue for I think 50 years maybe was the father of father and grandfather of one of our longtime members of this congregation. When you walk into the Doheny synagogue, there's a big plaque on the wall about him. And then we'll go to the Rumbach synagogue, which is a restored synagogue. Paul, do you want to talk about that one?
It's a beautiful synagogue. It served as a detention center through the 1920s and 1930s for Jews who were being picked up by the police, by the Hungarian police, even then, having come into the country, fleeing persecution elsewhere. It's a beautiful site. I just say a word about Doheny synagogue. When you look at this, and when Michael began talking, he said, yeah, this is all about Ashkenazi Jews. Well, a lot of it is about Ashkenazi Jews, but take a look at this building and you see the impact of Sephardic culture, and you will see it throughout the region, that the eastern part of the region, not so much in Vienna, because there were actually Sephardic Jews in this area as well, who came when the Ottoman Empire, when the Turks controlled much of Central Europe, including all of what today is Hungary. It's important to remember the Turks expanded into Europe. The Ottoman Empire expanded into Europe twice, in the 16th century and again in the 17th century, getting all the way up to the walls of Vienna 2 times. With them came Sephardic Jews. And when the Turks were pushed back, some of those Jews stayed. And there's quite strong Sephardic influence in some of the places that we'll see. Here's just a graphic example of the architectural influence.
Absolutely. And I'm forgetting the name of it, but this was not, as Paul says, it wasn't Ashkenazi Orthodox, it wasn't Reform Judaism. They had their own name.
Neolog,
right.
Which is modern.
So that's what that is. For those of you who are longtime members of Temple Road Shalom, if you remember our sanctuary before the construction, we had these round white lights on the sides of the temple, kind of behind where the choir sits, and then on the other side. The reason those were there is because Rabbi Berkowitz wanted to be reminded of what it was like praying in the Doheny synagogue. And so when you walk into Doheny, you'll see those same lights all over. It's really a impressive thing, and brings everything into perspective. And as Barbara says, Central Synagogue, right, is in Midtown Manhattan is nearly a copy of the Doheny Synagogue, which is true. So that's our last day. We then get up in the morning after a farewell dinner, and we'll learn about what's happening now in Hungary with the Jewish population. That's going to be an important discussion that we'll have. So after that dinner, we wake up in the morning and we fly home. For those of you who are flying home, unless you want to go on to something else, great.
Let me make one other point, Michael. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
On that list of things from Ayelet, they just didn't include on the list, but there is a very powerful Holocaust museum in Budapest with its own really interesting story. When it was built, which was 2004, I believe, it was a pet project of the current Hungarian prime minister, who wanted to show that Hungary remembered the past of the Holocaust. And when it was built, it was absolutely the best exhibit on the Holocaust any place in Europe. Same prime minister came back to power in 2010. That's Viktor Orban, who today when you read the papers, you see being pro-Russian, not defense of Ukraine, calling for illiberal democracy, which essentially means dictatorial rule, and a distortion of parliamentary practice and democratic practice. From 2010 forward, the very same man with the very same cohort of people around him has done everything possible to make it difficult for that Holocaust memorial to keep its doors open. And it's just an interesting picture of how even in the post-communist era, things can change very, very quickly. The significance of the museum itself, well, remember that of the 6 million Jews murdered in the Holocaust, 600,000 of them were Hungarian Jews. So 1 of every 10 victims. And it's important to see that at least they are remembered in a memorial, which hopefully will have a better future than it has a present right now, if Hungary manages to redeem itself from illiberal democracy.
Thank you, Paul. And I will tell you that we're still working with Ayelet. There will be other things that are not on the itinerary that we will end up seeing. Some things might come off, but so that's still in process. Let's jump to the prices. And again, I'm still waiting to hear back from Ayelet about some other scenarios, but this is how they price it at this moment. So this is nothing to do with the pre-tour to Berlin. This is just Warsaw through Budapest. Depending on how many people we have, if we have 2 buses, it will be still priced at the 30 paying per bus. But I'm going to ask them, does the price go down, for example, if there's 40 people per bus? So, but you see the price is different between 20 and 30 people. Obviously, there's a little bit of a savings if you pay by check instead of credit card. And those are based on double occupancy. And this is only for the land part. So the airfare is on you to pick the airfare and pick the flights that you want to use to get there. There's not going to be a group flight. And some people like to use miles, or some people like to go on a certain plane, or you might want to even go a couple days early to get, used to the time change, whatever it is. But that is why we're not doing a group airfare. And then there's that extra amount for single occupancy if you're staying in a hotel room by yourself. The hotels we've already talked about, they could change, but that's pretty much it. There's another hotel in Warsaw. It says the Bristol Hotel, and you're adding $190 total if you want to stay at that hotel. I don't know the difference of the 2 hotels, so I can't answer that question now, but we will have an opportunity to have questions to Ayelet down the road.
Mike, you do have some questions about pieces of this pricing and such. So maybe we could look together at these questions. And then once we're done with the screen, there were some general questions that I can help us get to.
Yes. The questions on the pricing, where were those? Or do you want to?
They start, sure. Since the prices vary, is there only one deposit? I believe the answer to that would be yes. Correct, Mike? Even if the prices vary, there's still
Yes.
there's one deposit. It's probably going to be a set,
Right.
500. They usually have, am I right, Mike? These
Yeah.
deposits where you can get it. There's a small fee you'll never get back, whatever, and then you can get it back all up until 90 days before travel or something like that.
Yeah, I have that written down for everybody. Yes.
Um,
The intra-Europe flights, they are included. So this price does not, this price includes everything on the trip from the moment we get to Warsaw until the moment we leave Budapest, which includes those other 2 flights that we need to take. Those will be group flights, and we will be together on those flights. So you don't have to pay extra for that. If you look at the prices include the hotel stays, all the touring, the sightseeing, the entrance fees to all the places we're going to go to. We'll have not only you know, the Paul, me, Amy, and potentially another person if we have multiple buses. But Ayelet will have a main tour guide, which will be with us the entire time on each bus. And then we'll also have guides in each city. So there'll be, those are all included. The meals, every breakfast is included every day. There's one box lunch, the rest lunches are on your own. And dinners, 6 dinners are included on the trip. And if you are, I'm not sure how the transfers work. There might be one, if people are coming in at the same time, there may be one bus that could be organized to bring everyone to the first hotel. And of course, we're all going to the airport after the trip. So that would be included on that transportation, including porterage for your luggage. These are the kind of questions that once we know, you know, how many people we're talking about, how many buses, that kind of thing, we'll have Ayelet do a meeting with all of us to explain some of these details.
I would just say in
Yeah.
Warsaw, which is would be the starting point for many people, the airport is actually very close to the city, and a cab ride from the airport to the center of town is about $10.
Amy Reich asked what the airfare may run. I don't know. I'm sorry. I hadn't looked into that yet. And I also think because we're a year away, it might even be too hard to get an idea. I think it also depends on fuel charges, fuel surcharges, and those kinds of things too. So Ayelet has an app that you can download that we'll have on the trip, though you'll be able to keep track of everything that you need to know on your phone. What's not included, obviously airfare, departure taxes that the airfare will charge you, and any fuel charges that the the airlines will charge you. There is an additional $25 per day per person that Ayelet is charging to pay for tips to the guide, the drivers, waiters. So that will be additional. I recommend, obviously, if you do go on this trip, travel insurance should be a must. They also don't pay for COVID tests. There may be some COVID tests that you might have to pay for, and that might be not so much an Ayelet rule or our rule, but a rule to get into that country. So we'll have to see what they ask for. So your deposit, as Amy said, $500 per person once you register, and then 90 days before your departure, so that puts it in August, I think. That's when full payment would be due. You can cancel up to 121 days before and get all your money back. And then between, let's see, I think is that right? So 200, I don't think 10 days is, I think that's a mistake. I think I typed something, I missed something there, but it's up to 91 days before. Oh, I guess it's 100. Oh, it's 120. That's what it is. So 120 to 91 days. If you cancel, you lose $250 per person. If you cancel within 90 days of the trip to 31 days, you lose $500 per person. And if you cancel less than 30 days before the trip, so basically by the end of September, you would lose that money that you put down, or use the whole payment, rather, the whole cost of the trip. So that's why insurance is really important. Okay, let's go back to, before we go to Berlin, Paul, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, there's a question. I was just looking at the questions in the chat. There's one from Robert Silverman, place to discuss the position of Jews in World War I. Now, World War I is really a critical moment in the trajectory of Jewish history in this part of the world, because all the borders change. Jews who had been in the Habsburg Empire, living in Galicia in Poland, suddenly are in an independent state of Poland. Jews in Hungary, I've already talked about the dramatic change for them as a result of what happens in World War I. There's a lot of military action in the eastern and southeastern parts of Poland, and that drives many Jews to flee the region. A lot of Jews come to the United States in that period because they're running away from a military conflict, which is taking place where they live. So there's definitely discussion of even the existence of the state of Austria as we know it today. Well, there was no such Austria before World War I. There was the Austrian Empire. Austrian Empire included all of Czechoslovakia, the Czech part and the Slovak part, and some of the Ukrainian part. It included half of what became Yugoslavia after World War I. So the World War I is really a dramatic moment for Jews in the region, and it changes some of the patterns of relationships between Jews and non-Jews in each of the countries that are included on the trip. So the answer is it has to be discussed because those attitude changes have an impact 20 years later during World War II and during the Holocaust. Are Jews considered part of the community, or are Jews dispensable? Do we turn away from them and let happen what we know is happening? Or is there some effort to protect them? And in each of these places, the history is different. That's what's so fascinating about this particular region. The pattern of Polish-Jewish relations, very different from the pattern of Hungarian-Jewish relations, very different from German-Jewish relations. And a lot of it reflects on is a reflection of how long the communities have been there, under what kind of laws they have, and rules and practices they've functioned within their communities. Even that issue of the Ukrainian border, which today we think of as being significant for today's reasons, have to remember that it's important to know that during the partitions of Poland, that borderline was the border between Russian-occupied Poland, the Russian part of Poland, and the Austrian part, and which side of the line you were on made a tremendous difference. In World War II, after the Nazi-Soviet pact, that same line was the border line between Soviet-occupied Eastern Poland and German-occupied Western Poland. And which side of the line you were on made a phenomenal difference. So there's history to all of it, including the moment of World War I. I'm sort of rambling a little bit from Bob Silverman's question, but hopefully that will give a greater meaning to the visit, to understand why it looks the way it looks today, and why it looked the way it looked before the Holocaust.
Paul, thank you. One of the things that, and I saw this as one of the questions, we will have opportunities over the course of this year to have some sessions together to study about this, what you're going to see, and the history with Paul. We'll have books that we will recommend to you, and even movies to watch, all in preparation for the trip. So that'll be part of it. I'm just going to go back to the couple of the questions, and then I have to end this call at 10:45, but so I want to make sure there's time to do the pre-tour stuff. But let me go back to the questions. So the difference between this trip and our 2017 trip was that we went to Prague and we went to Berlin, and we didn't go to Vienna. Those were the differences. If you want to do a your own pre-trip or post-trip, yes, Ayelet will certainly help you arrange that. If there's enough interest in people who wanting to do a group trip to Prague instead of Berlin, or a post-trip to Prague or something like that, we can also get Ayelet to give us some, to create a group for that as well, just like we're going to do for Berlin. Okay, let's see.
We just say, though, that there won't be a staff leader for that. Mike is the only staff leader available for the pre-trip. The clergy, Mike and I
Right.
can't be out together for quite that long time, so thank you.
Right. Okay, and
I see a
then,
question about visas. All of these
Good.
countries, you show up at the airport and you get into the country. You don't have to do pre-visa preparation.
okay, is there anything else?
How much walking?
It's a great question. It depends on the city. Like when we were in, I think one of the longest walks we had was when we were at Birkenau. Do you remember, Paul? If,
I would say there's a fair amount of walking in each of these places, actually, as so often happened because the Jewish presence was so strong. Jewish sites are often in the center of town, and that makes it very difficult to move with vehicles. So I wouldn't underestimate that. Maybe
yeah, I'm not really sure, but there is a lot of walking. This is true. So I think the weather was a question. It could be cold in November. I remember it cold. It started out when I was there in October. It was beautiful, but I remember having to wear my winter coat when towards the later part of the trip. And I see people who know that, who've been to these places, are shaking their heads. So be prepared for that. The single
Dark and
supplement.
gray.
What's that? What's that, Barbara?
Dark and gray with, yeah, right, Paul?
although I was in that region last week and it was sunny and warm. It varies year to year,
Yeah, so.
but you have to be prepared.
And the single supplement price, Cindy, you mentioned it seems very high. I agree with you, it does. And I will ask Ayelet about that, make sure that that is correct.
Just to say, Mike, it's perfectly consistent with my single supplement in the Israel trip. It is
okay.
exactly well, we're a few less days, but it's the same.
I
So,
see. So
and that's
it's
a
all about
different
the
travel
hotel.
company. It's a
Right.
different travel company. It's a different country, but so I don't think it's, basically what you're looking at, realize is that hotel room. One person is covering the cost for all the days of the trip. And so that is probably fairly consistent.
Yeah. Lynn asked about headsets. Yes, last time we did have headsets for everyone, so that when we're walking around and, the group is kind of spread out as you're walking, that you can still hear the guide as they're talking. Okay, I think I'm gonna jump unless there's something else, Amy or Paul, that you saw in the questions. Do you have to commit to Berlin?
I don't believe there are any vaccines required. In terms of COVID in general, Europe is like in a way different place, and they've like lost the COVID stuff long before we did. So there are no, I'm not aware, Paul, you would know better, but there's no vaccines for entering the country that I know.
No, but there are often vaccination verification in order to get on an international flight from the United States.
Not
Can
anymore.
non-temple members attend?
And
Not anymore.
those are coming from the airlines.
They've dropped, at least at this moment, they've dropped them that I know of, but they were there, but we'll see what happens. Who knows what we will be in next year, right?
That's right.
Beth asked about non-temple members. I don't have an answer for you right now, Beth. I need to find out if we have so many people from the temple that want to go, that's first priority. So we may just have to see. I know for our Israel trips, we have let non-members go, but it's a little bit different because generally we have space on the bus.
And we do prioritize our members first, so, you know, there's a period of time when maybe just members and then the non-members come second.
And as far as what to do next, there will be a link that I send out once Ayala gives it to me that where you sign up on their website for the deposit.
Okay.
Let me just jump to the pre-tour to Berlin, October 24th to 28th. We fly it overnight, so we arrive there on the 25th. We take a tour of Berlin. We stop at the synagogue that is really just a museum at this point. The actual synagogue is not standing anymore. It's part of it is there. That's where Louis Lewandowski, who was the music director there, we sing a lot of his music. We'll talk about him and the role of Reform Judaism, which had its origins in Germany. We'll visit the Old Jewish Quarter, the Otto White Museum. We'll have a welcome dinner. We're staying potentially at the Westin Graham, which is a much better hotel, I think, than we stayed at last time, and closer to things. And the next day, we'll go to Wannsee, which is where the final solution was created. Is that right, Paul?
Well, it's by the time that meeting took place, which was January of 1942, there had already been a lot of killing in the East. Wannsee is the moment when the SS and Adolf Eichmann appear as the central figures and begin the process of sweeping Jews from all of Europe toward the death camps that the Germans were building in occupied Poland. So it's not quite when it was decided to murder the Jews of Europe. It was rather when a process for actually cleaning the whole continent, cleansing the whole continent was the term that they used, was put in place bureaucratically.
And then the bridge that you see here in the picture, we'll cross that bridge. That was a famous exchange point for Soviet spies during the Cold War. We'll go to Potsdam, Sanssouci.
Potsdam, Sanssouci Palace, that's the equivalent summer home of the Hohenzollern dynasty, which was the Prussian kings and then emperors of United Germany after the 19th century.
We'll then also stop at the Gleis 17 Memorial, which was a train station where Jews were taken to concentration camps from Berlin. On the next day, we'll drive past, we'll go to the Brandenburg Gate. We'll drive past Checkpoint Charlie. We'll go to the Berlin Holocaust Memorial, which is an interesting place to see. Burning Book Memorial. Some parts of the Berlin Wall that are still standing, we'll see. And we'll go to a German synagogue for services that night and have Shabbat dinner together. The next day will be kind of a morning on your own, and then we'll go to the Museum Island where the Pergamon Museum is, which I did not go to last time. It was on your own, but I was told by the people who went there that it was an amazing place to see. And so then we will have dinner together, a night out, kind of on the town, and then the next morning I think we head to Warsaw. The prices for the Berlin pre-tour based on how many people are going. So this is a 30-person price. It's basically $2,000. If it's less than that, then it's a little bit more, another $200 or so. $835 for single occupancy. We're 4 nights in Berlin and we're staying at the Westin. Same things that include in the other trip, all touring, sightseeing, the buses, the guides, entrance fees, breakfast every day, 3 dinners. So 3 of the 4 nights were dinner together, and airport transfers if we're together. And then finally, just, if you are interested in going, when you sign up, it'll be through the I Yell It website.
Can I just ask, Mike, one person did ask whether if you go on the pre-tour to Berlin, whether that includes your flight to Warsaw, or whether you have to arrange and secure that and pay for it independently.
I believe it includes your flight to Warsaw. I'll double check on that, but I think that once you're in the country, so in this case, once you get to Berlin or once you get to Warsaw, every transportation from that point is included. So I'll double check, but I believe it's included. Okay. We have been working with I Yell It for many years. I've known them since I started in the Cantorate when, many years ago, 20, 30 years ago. So they survived COVID with a lot of companies that did go under during COVID because people weren't traveling. And they survived by doing a lot of
Please be outside for dismissal in 3 minutes. Please be outside.
they did a lot of scholarly talks and things like that to keep their business going. Anyway, I really like the company. It's family owned, and I've been working with them for many years. So what's next is you will hear from me once I get from I Yell It the information. I will send you the information. And then you just start making deposits at that point, and the fee then will be due around August or so for the balance. If we go on the pre-trip, will we return to Berlin for further back to DC? No, if you go on the pre-trip to Berlin, you will fly to Berlin, but you'll fly home from Budapest.
But you could hop to Berlin, and that
yeah.
might be a better cost for you.
Right, you could do
But
whatever.
that's your call.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the one advantage of not having group airfare and a group flight is, you can make whatever arrangements you want to make. And I Yell It will help you if you want their help on that. Okay, well, that's a good overview of the trip. I hope that you'll all consider this. It really, truly is an unbelievable experience. I'm so pleased that Paul wants to join us again and bring his talents and his scholarly narrative to this. So you will all be blown away by this trip if you go. And once we know how many people are going, we'll have a better idea of kind of putting this all together and the number of buses and those kinds of things. So feel free to send me an email or call me if you have any questions. And we'll be back in touch. All right. Thank you all.
Michael,
Thanks,
can
Mike.
you send us this video?
Which video?
Yeah, can you send it to us so we have the itinerary as it stands right now?
Oh, yes, that actually, do you have access to the chat where I saw it was reposted in the chat again? Let me see if I can do it. And I
It's in
sent
the
it
chat
last
a couple
night.
times. It came to you on an email, or I can send it to you, Melissa, too.
Here they are. I'll put it in the chat right now. And those are the emails and the pricing. And also it came in an email last night as well. Where can you view this recording? Oh, I should stop the recording. Thank you for reminding me. I will send an email to everybody that had signed up with us that were interested in the trip. Probably Monday with the recording, because Otto can do that. I can send an email today for all of you who registered on the Zoom link. There are different registrations, right? In order to get this link, you had to register on Zoom. I have that email list. I will send that out with these things on there later this morning. But the full list, if you didn't come on the Zoom, so you can tell anybody if they didn't come to it, but they registered that they were interested in the trip, Otto has that list and we'll send that out on Monday. Okay? All right. Have a great day, everybody. I got to go to Sheer Harmony.
I gotta go give blood. Over to the temple to give blood.
I wish I
Bye-bye.
could come sing.
Thank you so much. It's a great briefing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.